إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليًا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليًا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل. حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. لا
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى الله أكبر أستغفر الله الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أستغفر الله الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته أقوم الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أستغفر الله الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. آه.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك، لا إله إلا أنت، أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله وأنه حجة الله صلوات الله عليه. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربي. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا صرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سبحان الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
Surah Fatiha. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي كحرت بها كل شيء وخزلها كل شيء وزللها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أزاله كل شيء يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحت كل السام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النكام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لكل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفئ بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلحمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بكسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم أسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعزم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عزم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وزحر أمرك وغلب كحرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن
والفرار من حكومتك. اللهم أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لكبائح ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي الكبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلاء أكلته وكم من إصار وكيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من صناع جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عزم بلائي وافرت بي سوء حالي وكسرت بي أعمالي وكدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أمالي وخدتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومثالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفزحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا ولي في جميع الأمور أتوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أحوى وأسأده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاءك ولزمني حكمك وبلاؤك وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مكرا مذعنا مؤترفا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزأ نتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شد وصاكي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني. ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي، يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي. أبني لابتداء كرمك وصالف برك بي، يا إلهي وسيدي وربي. أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد ما انتوى إليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهجا به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك. وبعد صدق ترافي ودعائي خاضعا ربوبيتك، هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تزيئ من ربيت، أو تبعد من أدنيت، أو تشرد من آويت، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك الساجدة، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك الصادقة، وبشكرك مادحة، وعلى قلوب اترفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى زمار أحوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا رب. يا كريم يا رب. يا كريم يا رب. وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، ألا أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه، قليل مكسور، يسير بقاء، كثير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته، ويدوم مقامه، ولا يخفف عن نحله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك. وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي. فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين، يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي. لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما من هذا الجوع أبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته، أملت للملاء مدته. فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، فرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فحبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وحبني يا إلهي، صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر وأنا نظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي يفوق؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأزجن إليك بين أهل هذا الجيج العاملين، ولا أصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولا أبكين إليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولا أنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين، أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يزج إليك زجيج مؤمل رحمته، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي. فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يهلكه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا؟ أم كيف يتكلكل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقا؟ أم كيف تجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربا؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في إتكه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات، ما ذلك الظن بك، ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك، وكزيت به من إخلاد معانديك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كان لأحد فيها مكرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك، أقسمت أن تمنعها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها الوالدين، وأن تجل صنعك كنت مبتدئا، وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما. أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالكزية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبت وكل قبيح أسررت وكل جحل عملت كتمته أو أعلنت أو خفيته أو أزهرت وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت رقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك ركي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بالضر ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك مأمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وخالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه مولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب كوي على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في اتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في البارزين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فارده ومن كادني فكده واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك واقربهم منزلة منك وخسهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجود لي بجودك وعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك وجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وكلني أسرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك كزيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وزمنت لهم إجابة فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني مناي ولا تعتأ من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النكام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. So we, alhamdulillah, have reached Allama Tabatabai in regards to the discussion we were having. The discussion we were having was regarding how much of a hujjah, and I use the Arabic terms on purpose, I've said this before. How much is it binding, how much is it hujjah on us? A khabar wahid, a hadith that checks all the boxes of reliability if it was in a fiqhi context. How much hujjiyah does such a hadith have for us in non-fiqhi matters? Tafsir, history, I don't know, medicine, a lot of different things. To the point where even if like there's hadiths that tell us there is life somewhere on another planet. Obviously, if an imam tells me that directly, I take it from him. Problem is that a person, anyone who really is familiar with how the hadith corpus, both in the Shi'i school of thought and in the Sunni school of thought, came together, they will be aware of the issues that we have therein. And so, because of those issues, and just the filters that a hadith goes through before it finally and eventually reaches us, because of that, a person can never have 100% yaqeen when there's one hadith or two hadith or three hadith in front of them regarding a matter. The best that one can achieve there is a dhann. This is something that everyone agrees on, that khabar wahid is dhanni. Dhann meaning it's conjecture. It isn't something that we have 100% conviction in. 70%, 80%, 65%, whatever. Okay. Tabatabai, obviously, he's going to be mostly talking about these hadiths and if whether or not they are binding on us and they're hujjah for us when it comes to tafsir of the Quran, because that's what he's usually dealing with, correct? Tafsir of Quran. But it's more than that. And he might even point out other fields as well. But yes, the main thing that he's going to be speaking about is going to be the Quran and tafsir of the Quran through khabar wahid. Now it's interesting, once we go through it, we'll see that he is not a big fan of doing tafsir through khabar wahid. Once again, if the Imam, and he'll point this out later himself, if a ma'soom directly tells me something, it's different, obviously. But a hadith that has gone through at least 5, 6, 10 filters before it reaches us is not the same as the saying of an Imam directly to us. Alright, so no one should ever think that, oh, Tabatabai, he believes only in the Quran, not in the Ahlul Bayt. Obviously not. This is something that is laughable. Yeah. But sometimes you feel like people make that mistake because they conflate the two. The hadith versus the Imam actually saying something to me directly. These are two different things, obviously. Anyway, we have two books of his that we're going to speak about a little bit, or a quote, and then I'm going to get into maybe 6, 7, 8, 10 examples in his tafsir where he practically is living up to this rule that he's adopted himself. You'll see. And then in the end, I'll share something else with you as well, hopefully, if we get there, of how it seems like he might even go against this rule himself sometimes. We'll have to see if that's the case or not. Here, in his book, Quran in Islam, the Quran in Islam, he speaks about this rule. Now he says, the Quran itself tells us the explanation of the Prophet ﷺ and the Ahlul Bayt ﷺ regarding the tafsir of verses of the Quran have hujjiyah on us. Okay, the Quran itself is telling us. This hujjiyah holds for the verbal and explicit sarih sayings of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt. Okay, so that means if they talk to me directly, he says, the Quran is telling us when the Prophet is sent with the Quran and the Quran tells the Prophet, لِتُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ, we're sending you with this Quran so that you may clarify it for the people. Obviously, the Prophet is a person who does tafsir of Quran for us. If he speaks to me in a way that is clear, obviously, and it is directly him speaking to me, that's what he's saying. Now the verse spoke about the Prophet, لِتُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ. Tubayyina is speaking to one person here. O Prophet, so you may clarify. Where did we get the Ahlul Bayt part from? The Shi'i school obviously believes that yes, that the Quran, the Ahlul Bayt, the Prophet, they're all inseparable. So the Ahlul Bayt fall under the same category. And that's why he's brought it in the book. He says, the Prophet or the Ahlul Bayt. If they do tafsir for us, yes, that's hujjah on us. But it holds for the verbal and explicit sayings of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt. And also, if you want to use hadith, that's fine, but these have to be hadiths that we are 100% sure reflect the words of the Imams. Not 80%, 70%. Anything under yaqeen is going to be dhann, and we've been told we're not allowed to follow dhann. As for the akhbar, we don't have 100% certainty about. Okay, khabar wahid we call it, which are technically referred to as khabar wahid, whose hujjiyah is disputed amongst the Muslims. Its affair goes back to the one understanding the task of tafsir. Are you Sunni? Are you Shia? What's your approach? According to him now in the book, it says usually in the Sunni school, the khabar wahid referred to as sahih is usually followed unconditionally. Now we have a different approach to hadiths. Yeah, we don't really have this type of approach, but he says usually if a hadith is sahih, it is followed in that school of thought unconditionally. And in the Shi'i school, what is widely accepted is that khabar wahid, that is mawthuq as-sudur, reliable, let's say for now, is hujjah in legal rulings and not anything else. In fiqh, so if I have a tafsiri hadith, is it binding on me to accept what it says, even if it checks the boxes of reliability? He says no. He says no. He's not the first one to have said this. All the way back to Shaykh Tusi, Shaykh Mufid, these ones also say the same thing. Okay. So that's his Quran fil Islam, or in Farsi say Quran dal Islam. Just let me know if it changed the slide. Did it change the next slide? All right, so that's in his first book about Quran and the Quran and Islam. Now here we have Tafsir al-Mizan. Over there, he says, what's on? So in the book of al-Mizan now, which I want to say is his the last book that he wrote, obviously. So whatever he says there, or one of the last books that he wrote. So whatever he says there really is his ultimate view. Here he says, the decisive view of the usulis, okay, is that khabar mutawatir, that means a hadith that we're 100% sure what was it. Man kuntu mawla, fahada aliyun mawla. We're 100% sure these are the words that the Prophet uttered, because it's khabar mutawatir. He says, look, if according to us the usulis, the ones who are not akhbari, the ones who, they believe in refining the hadith, not just necessarily blindly following them, if that's a good way of saying it and representing them. I don't want to misrepresent them. But he says, we all believe that if a hadith is mutawatir, yeah, no problem. Or if it has clues, like it's saying something that the Quran also says. Okay, these are clues that give us yaqeen. Okay, if a hadith is like that, if a khabar is like that, then it is hujjah, clearly, and can be followed in all subjects. While khabar wahid is only hujjah in legal rulings. That means a khabar that it doesn't give you yaqeen is not mutawatir. It's not binding when it comes to other fields, okay, of Islam, other disciplines, As for historic information and beliefs, it isn't possible to make the khabar wahid hujjah in regards to them, because there's no practical legal implication in them. Remember, we had this discussion before, that Muhaqqiq Iraqi, this ones and other ones, they say, what does that even mean? That a hadith comes and tells me, let's just say, for example, that there is life on another planet. Okay? I hear this. I know that this person who's telling me this hadith right now heard it from someone else, who heard it from someone else, who heard it from like 5-6 people, all the way that the last one said, I heard it from the Imam. Maybe this guy is making it up. Maybe someone in there, although they're reliable people, maybe they got it wrong. Maybe they're mistaken, whatever it is. Maybe others that have problems and wanted to make the Shia look bad, because this happens a lot, and the Imams have done la'nat on these people, they would take the books of the Shia, hadith books, and inject certain hadiths in there. I don't know, maybe this is one of those cases. Yeah? So for these ones, right, Muhaqqiq Iraqi and others were like, what does it mean when a hadith that checks the boxes reaches me? I say to myself, you know what? From this day forward, I will have yaqeen that this is the case. How do you have yaqeen? Because there's nothing practically here for you to do. So you say, okay, I'll act as if I have yaqeen. Practically, I'll do this. The hadith says, do wudu like this, I'll do wudu like this. There's nothing practical here. It's just a belief now. So here, do I have a yaqeen when I don't have a yaqeen? You're putting me in a problem here. I can't do that. And that's what he's saying. He says, it's not possible to make khabar wahid hujjah in regards to them because there's no practical legal implication. It's just an intellectual implication, we called it, right? We talked about this before. There's no practical legal implication in them by which the lawmaker, i.e. Allah, can command the people to take it as an actual yaqeen. So Tabatabai is on the same page as the Iraqis and the other ones. Iraqis, not the Iraqis, I mean. Muhaqqiq al-Iraqi, that scholar, and other scholars that pointed out this matter. Okay. So that's another thing that he says in Al-Mizan. So I think it's very clear that what he's trying to say here. Now, last excerpt that I want to last. When doing tafsir of the verse of wilayah, of Surah Ma'idah, which verse is that? Innama waliyukum Allah wa rasuluhu, those ones I think. Or maybe Surah Ma'idah, I'm not sure which one. Probably Surah Ma'idah. Verse of wilayah of Surah Ma'idah, okay, Al-Yawm akmaltu lakum dinakum, that verse. He says these hadiths, okay, so there's hadiths there, okay, that say that somebody came and said, "O Prophet of Allah, if this is true that Ali is our Mawla, okay, then I can't tell God to send a stone on, like some adab on me or something and just kills me on the spot if this is true." And so Surah Al-Ma'arij, they say that according to hadiths, is talking about the incident where a stone came from the sky and hit this person in the head and killed him. سَأَلَ سَائِلٌ بِعَذَابٍ وَاقِعٍ. Someone asked for a punishment that was going to happen. Okay? And the hadith tells us that that's the story behind it. That when the verses of Surah Ma'idah were revealed and Imam Ali was made Khalifa, someone just couldn't handle it. And was like, you know what? This can't be true. If it's true, Allah kill me right now. And Allah killed him. Okay. And of course, this will be mentioned in lectures and whatnot, and sometimes it's accepted. I'm not saying I don't accept it or I accept it, but Tabatabai, when it comes to this matter here, he says these hadiths are khabar, akhbar, ahad. Ahad is the plural of wahid, okay? These are khabar wahids that are telling us this story about this verse of the Quran. Okay? They're not mutawatir or accompanied by clues bringing about yaqeen either. So in the end, I don't have yaqeen, correct? We say yes. And so as has been brought to the reader's attention before, it isn't our, i.e. I think our here is a royal hour, like that's how they speak. It isn't our methodology to rely on khabar wahid in other than Islamic legal rulings, the one that have practical implications. Okay? There's no practical implication here. I just have to believe something. But I can't believe it because believing something means yaqeen. I still have dhann, I don't have yaqeen. So it's not possible for you to force me to believe in it. Okay. And finally, he says somewhere else in Al-Mizan, he says, this verse is telling us the words of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt because of the hadith of Thaqalain. Enjoy authority and hujjiyah when it comes to the tafsir of the Quran and explaining its meaning. This is all applicable to their actual words, if I actually hear them telling me something. One has received directly from them through conversation. As for the khabar that reflects what they have said, it is hujjah if it is mutawatir, 100%. Or accompanied by clues and the like that give us absolute yaqeen. Because in this case, the khabar is their actual words. Otherwise, it will be devoid of hujjiyah. I know the Prophet said, Man kuntu mawlah. Those words were uttered because it's a mutawatir hadith. But other than that, he says, I don't know if they actually uttered it 100%, so I can't make a belief based on it either. Okay, that's what he's saying. So as you can see, it's recurring again and again in his tafsir of Al-Mizan. Otherwise, it will be devoid of hujjiyah due to the fact that it cannot be established. It is their actual words. Okay, so these are like some of the general things that he's said in Al-Mizan. Now I want to go and actually share with you specifics, examples in different parts of the Quran where he's speaking or regarding different matters, he speaks about how hadiths can't help us. Now, someone might say, oh, and I've said this again and again, I'm going to keep saying it again and again. Someone might say, oh, so that means all the hadiths we have that are not fiqhi ones are no good. Is that what you're saying? Just discard them? He himself will say, no, that's not the case. We're not supposed to discard them. But there's other ways we can use them. Okay? That's what he's saying. He's not saying they're no good. He's just saying you can't develop an understanding of the Quran through them necessarily and be 100% sure about it. All right. So he gives examples. Or there's an article that I found somewhere where it goes through some of the examples that he had that they found in his Tafsir al-Mizan, which is 20 volumes. So this is going to happen a lot, in which he goes against what some hadiths are saying. Not necessarily goes against. He says they're wrong, but he says I don't know. I can't be 100% sure about some of these details. So, for example, اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر, the Quran says. Well, in Surah, is it Surah Qamar? I think it is. Surah Qamar, it says that the Sa'a is near. The day of judgment is close. And in Shaqqal Qamar, the moon was split. So here, what do we usually know about the story? Is that something happened with the moon and it was split, right? What does he say in regards to this? He doesn't question the actual thing because he says the actual thing, the Quran is speaking about it. Okay, he says the story of Shaqqul Qamar and the splitting of the moon is a real thing that we can rely on and that has reached us through the Quran and hadiths. The only problem though, he says, is this. He says that the hadiths that mention this story, they are different. Sometimes even maybe contradictory. Like you can't really reconcile all of them and assume that all of them are accurate. Okay? And so as a result, from this perspective, they are all khabar wahid, he says, and cannot be relied on independently. Therefore, the characteristics and details that are mentioned in each of these, like one hadith has this detail, another one has another detail, this one has another detail. The ones that, if you can find 5, 10 of these hadith that are all mentioning the same thing, okay, we'll go with it. But he says if you find one says one thing, one says another thing, one says another thing, you can't just say all of them are correct if you can't reconcile them. Sometimes they're contradictory. He says we can't rely on them. All we can get from all of them is that the moon was split. So he agrees with the story, at least according to this. This is in one of his books. It's not in Al-Mizan. This is a book called Barrasihaya Tarihi. It's only in Farsi. And it was worked on by the late Ayatollah Khosrow Shahi. Anyway, it's a good book. There's some good stuff in there, by the way. So he says, in that book, he says, all we can get from it is that the Prophet pointed to the moon and it miraculously split. And that's all we know. All the other things that they say, he says we can't be sure about them. And so he doesn't even talk about them. Another story. They ask him about, I don't know if you've heard of this one, but how Venus came down, Zuhra, it's called in Arabic, came down into the roof of Imam Ali's house. He says we have hadith for this, and so he's asked about it. Here also, what does he say? He says, look, the story itself, like in the splitting of the moon, we had the story itself mentioned in the Quran, at least in one verse. But here he says this is not anywhere in the Quran. So all we have is some hadiths that are not mutawatir, that are not qat'i, that we're not 100% sure about. And so they're not something we can rely on. Finished. He doesn't even say anything else. He doesn't feel the need to like try to be any more apologetic or try to fix things up. Nope, he says it straight up. Regarding the order of the surahs and how they were revealed. Very interesting. This isn't something that you find in the Quran, right? This surah is talking about how the surahs were revealed, in which order they were revealed. We don't have anything like that. He says over here, he says that, he goes through some hadiths. He says these are from Ibn Abbas. And he has an issue. He says Ibn Abbas was very young when the Prophet passed away. Like, was he there actually when all the surahs were revealed? And which order they were revealed in? He says if this was the case, that he wasn't there, he was young when the Prophet passed away. All right? That means that if he's going to tell us which surah was revealed when, that's his own ijtihad. because the hadith that he's saying, or what he's telling us, he doesn't explain the reason for it. So if there's a chance it's his ijtihad, that's enough for us to not go by what he's saying, right? And so he says here, he says, therefore, and this is very interesting. He says, if we can't rely on these types of hadiths that tell us the order of the surahs, then what are we supposed to do when it comes to figuring out the order of the surahs? Okay? He's very relaxed. For us normal people, sometimes we want to know all the details. And we say, oh, but how are we supposed to figure out the details of this? How are we supposed to figure out the details of that? Sometimes it seems God doesn't care for us to know the details or not. I mean, if we can figure it out through research and reflection, we'll do it. Okay? It's not like God said, don't try to figure things out. We'll try to figure them out. But just because sometimes we can't figure out the details doesn't mean now we have to rely on dhann and attribute something to Islam when we're not sure about it. That's haram. To attribute something to Islam that I'm not sure about, that's actually called bid'ah. To say that Islam says something or wants something from me when I'm not sure about it. Okay? Here he says, so what are we supposed to do? We want, now figuring out the order of the surahs really helps in the tafsir of surahs. So this is something that's good, it's important. But how are we supposed to do that? He says, okay, based on what we said so far, that these hadiths are not going to be able to figure anything out for us, right? If we want to figure out if a surah is Mekki, was sent down in Mecca, or Madani, sent down in Medina, then we have no other choice but to do what? To look at the content of every surah and see if it matches before the migration of the Prophet or after the migration of the Prophet. We're going to do our own ijtihad. We have no choice. We have to try our best to figure it out. Yeah? He says, we'll go as far as we can with this. Yeah? And then he gives examples. He says, for example, Surah Insan, Surah Adiyat, Surah Mutaffifin. He says, we can tell from the content of them, although Mutaffifin is one of the shorter surahs, but we can tell from the content, according to him at least, that these were sent in Medina, not in Mecca. Although, look at this now, although hadiths are telling us these are Meccan surahs, that takes some audacity. That takes audacity. Tabatabai can do something like this. He has the jur'ah for this. Although there's some hadiths, now these might be Sunni ones too, I don't know. But there's hadiths that are saying a surah is a Meccan surah. But he says, when I look at the content, I can tell it's a Medinan surah. So I'm going to say it's Medinan. But how dare you? The hadith says it's Meccan. He says, hadith is dhanni, habibi. It's not something that's wajib to follow necessarily if it doesn't bring me yaqeen. Show me one verse, he'll tell you. Show me one hadith mutawatir that tells me I have to take every hadith even if it just gets me to 60, 70% certainty. There is nothing like that, he says. This next one is pretty cool. Now, Tabatabai, let me just say this on the side. Tabatabai, he had love for the faith. He wanted it to spread. And so there's this French, I don't know if we want to call him Orientalist / philosopher / mystic even, because I think he knew some mysticism too. There's Henry Corbin, he's famous. That he was a white guy back in Tabatabai's time that would travel to Iran, would sit down with Tabatabai, and Tabatabai would go out of his way to travel to see him as well, to teach him about Shi'ism. Okay, not just so he converts, and I've heard that he did, but all in all, so that he, as an intellectual, as an academic, understands and learns what Shi'ism is all about. So when he goes back to wherever he's from, he can spread that more in academia and explain what Shi'ism is all about. So you find these conversations and discussions that he had with Henry Corbin, Tabatabai did, you'll have these now recorded. Okay, and Tabatabai's students have recorded these and they have written books on these. So anyway, in one part, Corbin asks this question. He says, if there is a clash between aql, intellect, and Quran and Hadith, which one do you take? Now, first and foremost, we have to understand not just Tabatabai's aql, a philosophical aql. And so these are going to be very basic things sometimes, yeah, that all aqls agree on. That's what is meant by aql usually. Something not something that, oh, this person or that person understands that is under the influence of 50 different things that they have in their life. No. A sheer aql, mathematical / philosophical aql. Which one are you going to take, he asks him. Tabatabai gives an answer, okay? I don't want to get into that answer right now. But then he follows up with this. He says, Tabatabai, because Tabatabai says we'll take he says, Tabatabai says it's impossible. If something really is something that's Quran, really is something that we have hadith mutawatir on, aql won't really go against it ever. Okay? But then Corbin follows up with this. He says, look, but you believe that, now this is a discussion I don't want to get into right now at all, but you believe that the soul was not created before the body, the physical body. You believe this, right, Tabatabai? And this is a discussion that's there. Mullah Sadra talks about it, Tabatabai talks about it, others talk about it. That is it really the case that our soul existed before the physical body, or is it that the physical body is what initiates and the soul comes into existence as a result of the physical aspect of us? It's a long discussion. All right, but anyway, here Corbin says the Quran, or does he say the Quran? No, he says, don't we have hadiths that tell us that the soul existed before the body? In other words, don't you say that we have to take hadith and Quran before aql? You, with your aql philosophy, have reached this conclusion that the soul did not exist before the body, but we have literature that tells us that the soul did exist before the body. What is Tabatabai's response to this? He says, what kind of literature are we talking about though? What kind of literature are we talking about? He says, the creation of the soul before the physical body is not mentioned in the Quran. Parentheses, let me just say this, and what's happening in Gaza right now and stuff. There was one of these news things online I was reading, and there's comments at the bottom. Someone had said, yeah, these people, these Muslims, the Al-Mahdi is going to come, he's going to kill everybody according to their Quran. Everyone's going to be beheaded that doesn't go by what he says. The Quran says this. I was like, no, that's not the Quran. where did you get that? If you want to argue with the Quran, that's not what the Quran says. And he said, no, the Quran, that's why Egypt threw away 1,000 manuscripts of the Quran in the 1920s because of these verses. I was like, bro, the Quran existed before the 1920s, okay? It's reached us through other chains as well, like, relax. Anyway, point I'm trying to make is, this person was saying that something's in the Quran that's not. Sometimes there are people out there, they think something's in the Quran, it's not. Now, what's worse is that Muslims sometimes make these mistakes too. Here Tabatabai says, no, it's not mentioned in the Quran. Where in the Quran does it say that the soul necessarily existed before the body? Someone might say, oh, the Quran says, and I blew into it from my soul. No, there's discussion there too, and there's an explanation there as well. That's not necessarily what it means, that the soul existed before the body. Anyway, that's a side discussion, as I said. Tabatabai says, it's not mentioned in the Quran. There's hadiths that mention this, he says. There's hadiths that mention this. And then he says, when he says that these are all khabar wahid. And when it comes to the ma'arif and the teachings of Islam, we don't rely on khabar wahid only for certain details. We don't. So Tabatabai is no chill. Like, he says it. He doesn't care if anyone's going to get upset. Unless they bring yaqeen for us. If they're mutawatir, if they have other clues along with them, that gives us that certainty. All right. So that's another one. I'm not gonna read off of what he says. I'm just gonna go through this. For example, the verse that says Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa, that Allah ascended the throne. Okay. What does that mean? We have hadiths here that talk about they have some details about God. Tabatabai rejects those. He says we can't rely on these just because they're khabar wahid again. And he says one thing there. He says, look, in the science of usul, we've explained how, or they've been explained how, not following khabar wahid in ma'arif is something that is badihi, or almost badihi. Badihi means axiomatic, self-evident, clear, doesn't need explanation. Everyone knows it. That kind of thing. So to this extent, another set of verses talk about how the shayateen procreate, or shaitan procreates, okay? And then so he'll talk about some hadiths that the shayateen procreate the same way Godzilla does. That's not what the wording of the hadith is, but all in all, there isn't a need for two Godzillas for them to procreate. You've seen the movie, right? In the 90s, early 2000s. Godzilla can have kids by himself or herself or whatever Godzilla identifies as. Yeah. Some hadith says the shayateen lay eggs. Do we go by those? Do we go by this? Do we go? How do shayateen procreate? So there's a lot of hadith there, he says. But he says, look, كل ذلك مما لا دليل عليه إلا بعد الآحاد. The only dalil and reasons we have to believe these things is because of the khabar wahids that are out there. But guess what? Khabar wahid خاصة في أمثال هذه المسائل مما لا اعتماد فيها. When it comes to these matters, especially non-fiqhi matters, we don't rely on these hadiths. Yeah? How the shayateen or shaitan communicates with us when he's trying to fool us and he does waswasa to us. There's hadiths there as well. They're interesting, some of them. He says we get an idea from all of these hadiths coming together. There is a common theme in there. But the details of all of these, he says, I put them aside. In the story of the tablets of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, when he threw those tablets, right? Alqa al-alwah, he threw them. Okay, there's hadiths that tell us that these tablets, they were, that when God was writing on these tablets, Prophet Musa could hear the sound of the engraving of those guidelines in the tablets. There's some hadith that say that. Some hadith that say that these tablets are now buried in a mountain, in one of the mountains of Yemen. Okay? There's another hadith that says that the tablets were swallowed by stone, and so on. Tabatabai, when he sees all of this, gives the same answer again. He says these are khabar wahid. We can't really be sure about these details. In the story of Khidr, yeah, and some of the characteristics of him and what he looks like, I guess, and things like that, he says, once again, khabar wahid. About Prophet Yunus, we have hadith. About the disciples of Prophet Isa, when they said in the Surah Ma'idah means dastakhan, okay? In the Surah of dastakhan, why is it called dastakhan? Because they asked for a dastakhan. They asked for a table, okay, so that they can eat from the heavens. God over there, he says, look, I'll send this little sufra dastakhan that you want, I'll send it for you with heavenly food on it, I guess. But if any of you goes against me after this, I will destroy them. And I will punish them like no other, because I gave you everything. There's hadith that say once Allah said this, these disciples were like, you know what, we take it back, we don't want it. Tabatabai says, how do we know this is true? This is a hadith, khabar wahid again. Yeah, if the imam tells me directly, and there isn't like 10 filters the hadith goes through, I'll accept it. But when it goes through 10 filters, I don't know how true this can be, even if it checks the boxes. Now, a lot of these ones, the tafsir ones, they either might be missing a sanad even to begin with, for us to even see if it checks the boxes, or if they have the actual sanad, there's a good number of times they won't even check the boxes. That's the problem we have in these matters as well, which we'll talk about more later probably. Yes. So these are some examples. As you see, like all these different things, we'll have hadith for everything. Tabatabai is very skeptical. Now, having said all of that, I want to move to the third thing I wanted to talk to you about, which was there will be examples in Tafsir of Al-Mizan. Tabatabai himself will rely on hadiths. So is he going against what he believes in himself? Or is something else going on? We'll leave that for later, but let me just read this much. For example, in the verse that says, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ سَبْعًا مِنَ الْمَثَانِ وَالْقُرْآنَ الْعَظِيمِ, that, O Prophet, we have given you 7 of the duels. Okay? 7 of the couples or duels and the grand Quran we've given you, O Prophet. What is meant here by the 7? 7 of the duels. سَبْعًا مِنَ الْمَثَانِ. There are so many opinions here. Tabatabai, it's interesting. You open up this part, right away, he says, As-sab'ul mathani hiya suratul hamd. The 7 of the duels is suratul fatiha. Finished. What's your reason for it? He usually doesn't talk like this, by the way. He doesn't right away say what this identifies with, what this verse is identifying. But here he does that. Why are you doing this? Why are you saying this? Suratul hamd. على ما فسر في عدة من الروايات المأثورة, because of what hadiths have told us in regards to this meaning, Suratul Fatiha. Wait a minute, are they khabar mutawatir? No. Do they have clues that make it yaqeen? No. Then what is it then? What's your reason for saying that it's the Quran? He says, we have hadiths here. That's it. Well, you just went against your own rule, sir, that says you're not allowed to follow khabar wahid. Yeah? What's going on here? And so he says, we're not going to listen to the ones who say, oh, what is meant by the 7. Now the duals, I didn't explain it. Duals means just verses of Quran. For now, we'll take it as that. He says some people have said it means the 7 long surahs of the Quran. As-sab'u tiwal. Some have said, no, it's the 7 surahs that start with Hamim. Some have said it is the 7 scriptures or scrolls that were sent on the prophets of God. He says there, the Quran doesn't say anything about this, and we don't have any hadith that say what these people say. So we're just going to go with what the other hadiths tell us, that what is meant by the 7 is the Surah Fatiha. Now, sab' in Arabic, what does it mean? Sab', 7. Okay? Mathani means doubles, duals, okay? Couples. When you look at the translation, Shi'i translations, I didn't look at the other ones. Shi'i translations, like for example, Ayatollah Makarab Shirazi's translation of the Quran, you know what he says when he's translating this part of the verse? He doesn't say the 7 duals or doubles. He says Surah Fatiha. He doesn't even say, at least translate it word for word, and then in parentheses write Surah Fatiha. He just identifies it with Surah Fatiha. And other translations, when I looked, it said the same thing, Surah Fatiha. It's interesting. Here, for example, everyone goes by what the hadiths are saying. Is this a problem? Is this a discrepancy? Or does this go back to what I've mentioned a couple times before, that maybe we can find a way that we can rely on hadiths, but at the same time still believe in the rule that says, hey, khabar wahid on its own is not going to be binding on us when it comes to different things like tafsir and Islamic beliefs and aqidah and so on and so forth. Okay? I think there is somewhat of a way out. Yeah? Not very clear cut, but it's not that we dismiss everything either. But at the same time, brothers and sisters, I've said this one again and again too. Tabatabai, when he speaks against khabar wahid, usually, at least to the extent of my very limited knowledge, he will usually, when you look at the khabar wahids out there, they don't even check the boxes. They don't even check the boxes of reliability to begin with. That's the problem. Our people nowadays, they are developing ideologies based on one hadith in Bihar al-Anwar, for example. Even if it's not reliable. Or even if it's in Al-Kafi, but doesn't check the boxes. These are the problems that we're dealing with today. We'll talk about more later, inshallah. So we have still Ayatollah Jawadi Amli left. We have Ayatollah Ma'rifat left. Hopefully we'll do all of these in our next session, and we'll slowly wrap up in 1 or 2 more sessions. Any questions before I end? Yes? Mm. Very good, very good. So brother is saying it didn't say khabar wahid, it said ahadith, or here it says riwayat. Okay, riwayat. So riwayat is plural, so it means more than one. But look, we say, and everyone says, that either your hadith reaches a point in number that it's mutawatir, otherwise it's khabar wahid, even if it's 5 hadiths that say the same thing. Okay? And so this is something we defined from day one, that mutawatir means many to the point where I am 100% sure this was actually said. Anything other than that, even if it's 5 hadith, 3 hadith, 10 hadith, if it doesn't push me to the point of tawatur, it's considered khabar wahid still. So he didn't point out that these are mutawatir. He said ma'thura. Ma'thura means which has reached us. Riwayat, hadiths that have reached us, that tell us this. So what is the way out? There is, I feel, a way out of all of this. Inshallah, we'll see. We'll have to do more work on this, inshallah, in the future. Anything else? Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Assalamu alayka ya Rasulallah. Assalamu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام على الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. السلام على 9 المعصومين من ولد الحسين. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان. الأمان الأمان من فتن الزمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.